Hello everyone, my name is Brandon Oliveris from Co-Creation Coaching, and today I want to finish up my series on the Effortless Manifestation Process that I've been talking about for the last several weeks. I will link to those videos in the description for this one. I have 3 previous videos, and I'd really recommend viewing those ones before you watch this one, just because I'll be building on those in this video. So it might not make complete sense if you just see this one. Anyway, so what I want to talk about today is basically where to go from here, how to put the steps together, how to apply them to your everyday life, and basically how to go beyond the steps. Okay, because you don't want this to be a formulaic process, a step-by-step process that you do this and then this and then this. You don't want it to be like that because you want it to be part of your life. It should be how you live your life. Because, for a lot of us, I think really for all of us, before we knew the law of attraction, we lived a very disempowered life. We believed, for a lot of us, that that we were victims of chance, that things just happened at random, that we didn't have any control over things. And now we know the opposite. But now you have a technique by which you can apply the law of attraction successfully to your life. This is the way you live. Okay? And it's not only a technique. I mean, there are some techniques I talk about, but this is how the law of attraction works, and I hope you've gotten the understanding of that. And I just want to say I've really been blown away by the response I've gotten to the last several videos. It seems like this really resonates with a lot of you, so that really touches me, and so hopefully this has the same effect. And I really just want to bring this all together and help you to know how to apply this to your life. Okay? And so as we're doing this, I want you to keep in mind a manifestation that you really wanted to bring about in your life. Okay, I want you to think of a manifestation that has really been bugging you. Maybe not the biggest, if you want to do the biggest you can, but start with something that feels like a stretch for you. Okay? And so just to recap a bit, we had step 1, which was to make peace with what is. And with that, I mentioned mindfulness. I mentioned just not engaging the thoughts. And then we had step 2, which was to find the vibrational essence of your manifestation, which means to ask yourself why you want it. I talked about how everything you want because you believe you'll feel something once you have it. Right? So you want to determine what that thing is, what that emotion is, and then find a way to feel it. So let's start from the beginning. I'm going to assume right now, this is the first time you're doing this. It will be a little different once you do it for a while, which I'll talk about later. But in the beginning, with your manifestation, you're going to have some resistance, because if you didn't have resistance, as I've said, you would have your manifestation. The only thing holding your manifestation away from you is your resistance. And so, you want to apply step 1 to clear that resistance. And it might be a little bit difficult at first because you have that negative momentum. I talked about how it's hard to make a U-turn in a car if you're going at 70 miles per hour. You have to slow down a bit, and then you can turn around. Okay? So, the first thing I find useful is, you have these negative thoughts, you have this resistance, and you feel it, and you go within, and you basically stop fighting it. Because a lot of us, when we have these negative thoughts, we really fight them. Not necessarily consciously, but we resist it. We push against it. So if you go within yourself at that moment when you're feeling that resistance, you'll feel a pushing, you'll feel a fighting, you'll feel a tenseness in your body. and in your mind. It's the first thing that really, really helps most times is simply to let go, to stop fighting, stop resisting. If there is a negative thought that wants to come through your mind, stop fighting it. If there's a thought that says, I'm never going to succeed, if there's a thought that says, I can't get my dream job, if there's a thought that says, I'm always going to be alone, if there's a thought that says, I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. Yes, those thoughts are painful when you give credence to them, when you believe in them. But what you're doing is fighting them. And so when that comes up, the first thing I want you to do is to go within and just to let go. Stop the fight. Let the thought be what it is. It's only a thought. And I talked a lot about how your mind is telling stories. Right now, everything is perfectly okay, but your mind is telling stories about what might be. And so, you have the choice to believe in those or not. And so if you let go, if you stop fighting, you're going to immediately feel a great amount of relief. Okay? And you're just going to relax into it. That's the greatest thing you can do right now. And then you can start to apply mindfulness, which I talked about before. And not engaging with that thought. And what we're doing in this first step is just making some space to breathe. Okay, figuratively speaking. What I mean is, a lot of times this can be really oppressive. It can really, really weigh on you, and you can't see a way out. But by just doing this simple thing, it could be for a few minutes or for a few days or whatever it might be, but just doing this until you make enough room, you're going to really, really start to clear things up. Okay, so that's the step one that I've talked about before. Now, you don't have to get to 100% positive. I don't want this to be a perfectionistic thing. I don't want you to think, well, I'm feeling a little bit negative, so I have to keep doing this. You know, you're going to eventually get a little bored with just doing that, because you as an infinite creative being, you want to go out there and start to create. Okay, but this is just a cleanup process. It's like if you have a canvas that you're about to paint on, you don't want other stuff on it. You know, you don't want dust and debris and all sorts of other stuff that's cluttering your space. Right? You want to clear things up, and your mind is your inner canvas. When you create, you're painting on that inner canvas. But it has to be clear. Okay? But like I said, it doesn't have to be 100% clear. We can work on the clarity once we make some room, but you just need to make it so that you can see a bit of light. You just need to make it so you can perceive a way out. So the litmus test that I use for when you're ready to move on is this. Is this a need or a want, your manifestation? And a lot of times that need or want saying is sort of applied in the opposite way I mean it here. You know, people say, well, you should only purchase for what you need, not what you want. You know, if it's a want that you have, then you don't need to get that right now or something. And it's almost discouraged to go after what you want. Okay? But the thing is that the universe doesn't see needs, because the universe knows that your needs are always provided for. Even if you were to die, your needs would be provided for, because you are an eternal being. So, you know, let's say you die and you return to the other side, and okay, well, that's done, and then let's try it again. You know? This is an eternal expansion. So the universe knows your needs are always met. So when you're trying to create, you can't create for needs. You can't create for needs. You can only create for wants. Because you're here to want. You're here for the thrill of the desire, the thrill of going after it, the thrill of achieving it, and then the thrill of setting a new desire. That's why you're here. So don't come into this process saying, well, I need, $1,000 by this weekend to pay these bills and blah, 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 whatever. That won't work. Okay? Yes, you can do that in the right emotional state, but not like that. Not if you think it's a need. Okay, so is it a need or a want? Is it something that you are doing out of fear, out of panic, out of frustration? Or is it something you're doing out of joy and creativity and peace? There's a huge difference there. And again, it doesn't have to be 100%, but it's just, what's the general feeling of it? Why are you doing it? What's driving you here? What's driving you? Is it a need or is it a desire? Is it a creativity? So that's a litmus test. And again, it doesn't have to be 100% positive. It could be, 60% positive and 40% negative, or 40% positive and 60% negative. I like to do step one until you're right about in the midway point. If you imagine a spectrum, where on one side you have 100% negative and 0% positive, and on the other side you have 100% positive and 0% negative. If you imagine that, and right around the halfway point is 50-50, half positive, half negative, you want to be right around that point, maybe a little below, maybe a little above, when you start to move on to step two. Because that's when you start to clear space. That's when you start to realize, okay, I can do this. Okay, this is just something I want to create. Maybe there's a little bit of the, it'd really be nice if, and I really don't want to be without this sort of thing. But that's okay. And we can work on that. And I recommend continuing to work on that. But right around that halfway point where you feel hope, where you feel that it's possible, where you feel like it's not so oppressive as it first seemed, it's not so hopeless as it first seemed, that's where you can start to move into step two. Because in step two, now that's where we move towards the emotion. Okay? And so, like I said, you just start to focus on the light. So if you have, let's take positive as light and negative as dark, and you have, 60% light and 40% dark, you have a choice. Do you want to focus on the dark, or do you want to focus on the light? And when I say this, I don't mean good and evil sort of thing. I just mean positive or negative. Does it feel good or does it feel bad? And so you have that power to change where you're focusing. And remember, what you focus on expands. So if you focus on the dark, if you focus on what feels bad, it will grow. A lot of us will do this thing where if we have a whole bunch of stuff in life that's going wonderfully, and then one little niggling thing that keeps bugging us that's we're not so happy about, that's the thing we tend to focus on. And then it gets bigger, and then it affects everything else in life. So once you make that space, you just want to start to very gently shift your focus towards the light, towards the positive, towards what's probably going to be sensed as peace at first, because peace is really what's underneath all emotions. Okay? So you'll feel this peace, this calmness, this tranquility. And so you just start to put your focus there, and it grows. And the negative stuff gets even smaller. And then when you get pretty stable in this peace and tranquility thing, and it's getting bigger, again, it doesn't have to be 100%, but it's getting bigger, then you start to introduce this emotion that you want, a little more specific. So fun, security, safety, freedom, flexibility, joy, happiness, companionship, love, whatever the emotion is, or it could be several emotions. You start to move towards that. You just open up to feeling those emotions. And then as you do that, they will grow. And like I said in step 2, it might take a few days. It might not. If you really are clear of resistance, it could take literally a few seconds. I was reading a certain author's book, and he said, if he's really clear, it'll take him maybe 10 seconds to go through this, the process. Not this specific process, because it's something I developed, but something similar. About 10 seconds to just focus on that piece and let it become everything to him. And then to let it go. It takes about 10 seconds when you really have no resistance. So open up to that emotion. Abraham calls this setting the grid. Okay? Open up to that emotion. Let yourself feel it. Don't force it. Just let yourself feel it. And it will grow. And you can do several emotions, like I said. And so this is the process. And as you do this, you're going to have negative momentum that keeps cropping up for a while. And so step 1, step 2 kind of merges into one thing, where it's step 1 when I'm feeling bad, step 2 when I'm feeling pretty good. Step 1 when I'm feeling bad, and step 2 when I'm feeling pretty good. Okay, right now I'm feeling a little bit negative, so let's do a bit of step 1. Let's do a little bit of mindfulness. Let's let it go. Let's not fight it. And now look, I'm feeling a little bit more positive, and let's do some step 2, and let's really grow this. Let's let it grow. So it really feeds into each other. It really supports each other, these 2 steps. And that's how it is. Step 1 when you feel bad, step 2 when you feel relatively good. Okay? And remember, everything is a manifestation. Every thought, every emotion is a manifestation. So if you have a random thought that says, I'm worried about this specific thing, that's some negative momentum that's cropping up, and you have to meet that thought and say, okay, thought, I see you, I recognize you, I welcome you, I don't engage with you. Okay? And that's what you do. And if you have a thought that says, I'm excited about this manifestation, and it's really an authentic thought, it's not you trying to make things up, and how we do, like, I'm so excited about it, and you try to fake it until you make it. But if you have a real authentic thought that says, I'm looking forward to this, I'm excited about it, and you start to plan things or whatever it might be, that is proof of your positive momentum. So when that happens, you want to milk that a bit. You want to go with it. You want to say, oh yeah, I am excited, and let yourself feel it, and let it grow. Every time that thought comes up, let that feeling grow a bit. Go with it for a while. Let it take root within you and start to grow every time that comes up. And if you do that, if you disengage with every negative thought that arises, and you engage with every positive thought that arises, you recognize the positive momentum as it comes, then things will shift very quickly. Okay? And the negative momentum will start to peter out. And that's what I want to talk about here, is what happens after a while as you're practicing this, because that negative momentum, it'll really bug you for a while. It'll really be hard to overcome for a while. But after you've done this for a while, you're going to immediately sense when negative momentum has arisen. Because if you're feeling wonderful, wonderful, and all of a sudden a worry pops up, it might just be a really small thing, you will recognize it immediately. You will say, oh yeah, there's some negative momentum. I must have been focusing on something that wasn't to my liking. And when that happens, it'll be a lot easier to just send it on its way. You recognize that that is not something you want to entertain. You recognize that the thoughts that you entertain will become the experiences you have in the future. So you let it go. And it's a lot easier because when you have barely any negative momentum, then it's a lot easier to ignore whatever does come up. Abraham has this really cool metaphor about this where, if you have a car at the top of a hill and you sort of nudge it a little bit and it starts to go down the hill, it's a lot easier to stop that car if you get in front of it right away and just kind of nudge it backwards. It takes a very little bit of force compared to if it's barreling down the hill and it's like halfway down, 3/4 of the way down, and you try to stop it. There's no stopping that thing because it's picked up momentum. And so that's what it's like. Right now you have a lot of negative momentum probably. You're like that car barreling down the hill, so it takes a little bit more pressure to release that. But once you've done this for a while, then you'll immediately feel when you've engaged some negative momentum and you can stop it so much more easily. Okay, so it becomes a lot easier. And you're always going to be cultivating that inner state. You're going to be picky about which emotions you allow to come into your canvas. Like I said earlier, how your inner state is a canvas. You're going to be picky about which emotions are going to be painted there. And so things will really start to turn around. And it'll be a lot easier to manage that. But, this process works no matter if you're just starting it or if you've done it for a while and you just need to keep it up. It works no matter what. And so that's really what it is here. It's just allowing yourself to ignore the negative thoughts and engage with the positive thoughts. It really is what it boils down to. I mean, if you really want to put it into one sentence, that's about what it is, right? So, again, once you start to do that, it's going to get so much easier. Things are going to change very quickly if you're persistent about this. This is you creating your life from within. And remember, a little encouraging tidbit here is that if you're on your way to your manifestation or not. If you feel better now than you felt before, whether that's a second ago, a minute ago, an hour ago, a day ago, you're on your way because that emotional guidance system tells you when you're on track. If you feel better now than you did, you're on your way. And on the other hand, if you feel worse now than you did, you're walking in the opposite direction. But it's not a bad thing because you know it now and you can turn it around. And you can start to head in the right direction again. There's never a point at which you've used all your chances. You always have another chance. So that's how this all works. That's how these steps work together. They support one another. They really can be integrated into your life in a very easy way. But it requires paying attention to your inner state. It requires always being aware of what's going on within you. Because if what's going on within you is sort of like the control panel of life, it's where all the controls are. It's if you press this button, this will happen. If you press that button, that will happen. And flip this switch, and that will happen. You're going to be picky about what happens in there. Now, other people who don't know this will just let anything go in there and influence their state. And they're not going to be picky about that. But now you know, and now you'll be picky, and now you'll say, oh no, I am not going to allow that to happen. If I go in that direction, then bad things are going to happen. So you want to have that moment-by-moment awareness of your inner state. And there's no excuse that you can give yourself for not allowing that to happen. okay, for not keeping up with that. Not to say to blame yourself. What I'm saying is, you can do this at any time. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter your religion, your nationality. This is beyond all of this. This is the creative control panel of your life. And now you've learned how to work it. Now you've learned how to control it. What all the controls mean, how to change things. You learn how it all works. And like I said at first, I might fight against you a bit because you're used to moving in a certain direction. You're trying to turn things around. But once you're headed in the direction you want to be going in, it's easy to keep it up. It really, its job is to keep doing what it's always been doing. And so you want to build this new habit of going in the right direction. So I hope that all this makes sense. As always, if you have questions or comments, please comment on this video, and I'll be happy to answer you. If you enjoyed this video and would like more like this, please subscribe to my YouTube channel or visit my website at www.cocreationcoaching.org. Thanks everyone and have a great day.